Good morning and welcome back to Vermont Viewpoint. I am your Tuesday host, Paul Lane, chairman of the Vermont Republican Party. And with us in studio now, we have Bruce Roy, who is also running for the Chittenden Southeast Senate District. Bruce, thanks for joining me here in studio.
Yeah, good morning, Paul. You need to turn the AC on in here, though.
This is like many places in Vermont. What's an AC? Those are two letters in the alphabet that are non-consecutive. I don't know what you're talking about. I know it's funny. I've said that to friends who like moved south, and it's like, it's hot down here too, but you guys are prepared for it, right? Vermont's like, there's about 8 days out of the year you really need the AC. This year it feels like it's been more than 8 days.
Yeah.
But
yeah.
Good. Well, Bruce, just before we came on, we were talking a little bit about you and Javin running both for the same seat. So for folks who aren't aware, that Chittenden district is a 3-member district. So it means that you can vote for up to 3 people. There's 3 incumbent Democrats there right now.
Correct.
And before the break, we were talking about how similar you and Javin are, right?
Well, we were talking about how dissimilar we are. I'm a 70-year-old Vermonter. I've been here well over 50 years, living in Chittenden County. I've lived in Chittenden County longer than Javin's been alive, and there's a lot of energy with Javin. I love seeing it, and it was so very different. I mean, I'm an older guy. Javin's a young guy with lots of energy. So you look at us side by side, we're very, very different, but we have the same. We have the same kind of ideas. We have the same focus. We know where we've got to go in Vermont. But we look at it from different perspectives. He looks at it as a young man who's just starting his career and has a lot to give the state, more years ahead of him than he has behind him versus, this old guy sitting in front of you with the gray hair. Most of my years are behind me. So, he's looking to do things for his friends who are, as he's talked about, you talked about leaving the state or getting ready to leave the state. I'm doing it from the perspective, I'm here, I'm established, I love this place, I don't want to leave it. Yeah. I want to make it better for my grandkids.
Yeah.
We're very, very different, and I love the idea of running with him. I just do, and we talk a lot. It's going to be an exciting campaign for both of us.
I think it's so much more meaningful, right? When you have 2 people who are carbon copies of each other, is this kind of boring? But like you said, you guys are coming from totally different ends of the spectrum. And yet, when people are so different and yet are unified in the same purpose, working towards the same thing, there's something I think really special about that. And I'm excited to see the 2 of you guys running.
When we get together and talk a little bit, with his campaign manager and Cindy, my wife, campaign, we talk about stuff, and we both of us learn from each other, and it's exciting. I mean, this is different for me. This is my second time running for the Senate in Chittenden Southeast. Last time during the primary, my name was the only one on the ballot.
Yeah.
And that's hard. I knew I was going to win, but Javin's on the ballot with me, and we're working really hard. We're going to have a writing candidate too, so I'm really excited that we're going to have come November we'll have 3 Republicans on the ballot.
That's good. Now you mentioned you and Javin learned from each other. Has Javin tried to get you to do any goofy TikTok trending things for your campaign?
No, I know
he's unconvinced.
Yeah, I think he knows that's a losing proposition probably.
Good. Well, Bruce, you've got a lot of, like you mentioned, you've been in Vermont for a while. You have a lot of experience. For folks who maybe aren't familiar with you or from your campaign before, what's kind of your background? How did you spend your time here in Vermont, and what experience do you bring to the job?
Yeah, so I grew up from junior high. My mom and dad moved us from New Hampshire to Vermont in the late 60s. I went to schools in Essex Junction, public schools in Essex Junction, went to the University of Vermont, graduated from there, was part of an ROTC program that was affiliated with St. Michael's College. Spent 4 years in the Air Force on active duty down in the Deep South. Came back to Vermont to raise kids because it still is a great place to raise kids. I stayed in the Air Force as part of the National Guard. Spent 30 years in the National Guard. Eventually retiring as a colonel from the Vermont Air Guard. I'm very proud of my accomplishments and the great things the Air Guard did, especially during 9/11. I was part of that response. And I had a second career. I was a traditional guardsman. So I had a career at IBM, started out as a systems analyst, became an engineer, ended my career at IBM as a business manager, running, helping to run about a third of what was at the time the IBM microelectronics business.
Yeah, well, very. Now, Bruce, you mentioned that you came back to Vermont because you said it was a great place to raise kids. What were some of the things that made Vermont a great place, and how many of them are still there today, and what are some changes? Would you think you'd make that same decision today?
I think I would make the same decision because I love Vermont, and I wanted to come back to the Northeast. I did look at other places when it was time to come back. I looked at Connecticut and places where jobs were available at the time. It was, Vermont has this, it's a beautiful place. Environmentally, education, raising kids and sending them to public schools was great back then. The cost of living was decent. There was opportunities. IBM was growing at the time. Those things were things that came in, and family was here too. I mean, certainly you can't ever disregard that. I mean, and then you ask the following question. What's different? Certainly the cost of living has gone up. Taxes are incredible. When I came back to Vermont back in the late 70s, I could afford to buy a place. It was a good market, and you could find a reasonable place. Taxes were okay. In education, the kids are getting really good educations for a good price, and it was safe. I mean, Vermont, that was another thing. Great place to raise kids. It was safe. I never worried about the young boys I was helping raise being out in Vermont. It's a little different now.
Yeah, I know. I grew up in a much more rural part of Vermont. We never locked our door or the car doors. You leave the keys running, and then it really shook me a year or two ago. I was reading the little Student Observer because I live in St. George, so I get that paper too. And so there was a carjacking in Williston. And yes, it's been concerning. That public safety, I think, was one of those things that was like, Vermont was the best place because it was so safe. And I feel like even that very important quality that we held on to so long is kind of been under threat.
Yeah, and I don't like talking that, but those are the good old days. They were good when you were there, and they seem good really now. But we are where we are. Yeah. And you talk to guys like Chad about the good old days, they don't know what you're talking about, and it's not fair. I mean, it's not fair. You got to look at where we are, how we got here, and how do we go forward? Because
where can we get to?
And Vermont's a great place. I hate it when I see the numbers and people leaving, and as you and Javin have talked about with the UNH study and stuff, 18 to 34-year-olds, 60% are thinking about leaving in the next 5 years. Be honest with you, it breaks my heart. I mean, because I love Vermont. I love being in Vermont. I'm not afraid to say it. I'm not embarrassed to say it. And I want to be that same way for everybody.
Yeah. Well, in just a minute, we'll come back, Bruce, and we'll get some of your ideas, like you said, about where we can go from here, what we can do. We don't need to just, cry about what's wrong. The beautiful thing about our system of government, there's an opportunity to fix it. So more on that right after this. Welcome back, WDEV audience. You are listening to Vermont Viewpoint with a native Vermonter, Paul Dane, chairman of the Vermont Republican Party. And with me in studio is Bruce Roy, one of our candidates for the Senate in the Chittenden Southeast District. And Bruce, just to remind folks, what towns are included? Here's your pop quiz.
Boy. I know. I'm going to forget one. I'm getting in a lot of trouble, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, so there's 11 towns. And, I'll do it this way. It's mainly the Champlain Valley School District, the Mount Mansfield Union School District, South Burlington, and the South End 2 wards of Burlington. So that way I don't forget, really.
That's a good way to package it up there. Yeah, that's a good way. So Bruce, before the break, we were talking a little bit about, things, aren't as well as maybe we'd like them to be. How do you think we got here, and more importantly, how do we get into this ditch, and how do we get out of it?
Yeah, that's a great question, and I'm a data guy. I mean, it's one of the things. I'm, by education, I'm a mathematician. By by experience, I'm a systems analyst, engineer, business guy. So I like looking at numbers, and you can't get away from this one big number that in the state of Vermont, the legislature has been controlled by Democrats for the last 30 years. So you look at the downward trends, whether it's population or the upward trends on property taxes or, what's going on, it points directly, a direct correlation to who's been calling the shots in the legislature. When you're in the majority in the legislature, and you know this, you control a lot. You control who's the party chairman. The committee chair people. Yep. What gets put on the wall, what gets taken off the wall, goes forward. So policy gets formed in these committees. And the committees have all been led by Democrats over the last 30 years. And I'll be accused of bipartisanship, but the data's the data. Bipartisanship. So the data's the data. So, we've made some really good progress in the legislature as a conservative. I like seeing, 4 years ago when there was a supermajority and, Governor Scott was being veto overridden constantly, 12, 13 times, and that session ending in 24, it was, a lot of us Vermonters were thinking, could it get any worse? Could it really get any worse? Yeah. And we were voting down school budgets, trying to make things a little better on our property tax. So there was a grassroots going on there. Democrats said, we got the message, we'll make things better. Well, I think people understood they had to make things better. They got them voted. Yeah. And what happened? The supermajority was disbanded. We didn't, Republicans like myself and like yourself, we didn't get to a majority, but we got to where our voices at the table were being heard, which was great. So we got to a point where at the end of this last session, it could have been worse. So we went from, could it possibly get any worse to, it could have been worse. Well, that's not good enough. Yeah. It's not good enough. I believe we need a real change in policy, a real change in perspective, a new focus. Yeah. And I only think that comes with a majority. I'm running for the Senate, so I know a majority in the Senate. I think we need to have some new ideas, new focus, a change in priorities. And I really believe in my heart of hearts that it only comes with a change of majority in at least one house. Yeah. It'd be great if it was in both. But I know Governor Scott's got some great ideas. If he had some, real support in the legislature, I think we can dig ourselves out of this hole we've got in that you've talked about this morning already. Yeah. Property taxes, decreasing scores for students. Really no progress on the housing front. Health premiums, unbelievably high. The governor just did an executive order where he's laid out some great things where we can do stuff without legislation, with accordance legislation that we don't care about. We can do some things now. Yeah. And they shouldn't be fought. They're good ideas. Let's run with them and then do whatever you have to have and follow on with legislation. Yeah. Well, and like you said, the governor's got some ideas. They've been ignored by the legislature. They haven't been counter implemented the way that happened in the previous session. Yeah. But the Democratic controlled legislature hasn't been interested in doing some of the cost saving stuff on healthcare because they've got their own agenda. And this is a way of saying they're like, hey, let's not do nothing, because that's kind of been the Democrats' plan for a while. Let's do nothing or next to nothing. Let's keep the status quo, keep everything the same on education, keep everything the same on healthcare. If you get elected to the Senate, what are one of the things that you want to, maybe one particular policy issue that you want to see us do something different and better on? Yeah, so property taxes are what I hear about from everybody I talk to. So you got to get to the source of that, which is the education finance system. Yeah. That's where we got to do. And there was minimal progress made on that in this session. I mean, there was some compromise made at the end, and that was great. But I think that's a good term. It was minimal, and it was progress. It was progress, and that was good. I mean, and I think that was, to beat the drum one more time. That was because we had a voice at the table, right? Yeah. And so I think, because property taxes is a huge part of the unaffordability issue, as you mentioned earlier when you were talking, I think that's where we need to focus. I think there's a good start with the foundation formula. I think that's got to be put in place. I think there are some other things that I personally think we can do in the system that would make municipalities and districts more directly relatable to the budgets they pass. Yeah. It's hard to see that right now. It's kind of there, but it's kind of not. Mm-hmm. Prior to Act 60 it was a lot of accountability, and that's kind of drifted away. So I think we can do some things. I've got some ideas I'd like to bring forward. I think we can look at best practices that are going on, especially in New England, especially in New Hampshire. I mean, I bring up New Hampshire a lot, and we've started doing that more with the UNH studies, obviously. And as a business guy, you always look at best practices. You know, you can't be afraid to see what your competition's doing and how are they getting where they are and why are they beating you in certain areas.
Right.
And you know, may not like to hear it, but that state across the Connecticut River is our competition. You know, it's just Vermont upside down. And, you know, and you get a great view of Vermont from New Hampshire. I love it. But we got to see what's going on in the rest of the places. When we find out that, you know, we're one of only, you know, 8 states that taxes Social Security, you know, you got to look at those things and say, you know, let's see what other people are doing well. We don't have to invent everything. We don't have to.
Right. Yeah, no, that's a good point, and I think you mentioned, you know, the education and finance system. The thing I've always said is, right, it's like 10 people going out to dinner and agreeing to split the check, and the first 9 people order lobster. Is the 10th person going to order a salad?
Yeah.
If you're going to split the check, why bother? And that's sort of the moral hazard that has been built in to our system. It's one of the reasons no other state uses the system, because it's put pressure to constantly increase spending. So it looks like we've got a caller. We'll talk to Harry from Royalton. So Harry, what's on your mind?
I'd just like to know why in the late 50s and early 60s we ran a balanced budget and we always managed to take care of our own. And there was not many Democrats in office at the time.
I think you just answered your own question.
Well, okay.
I mean, one of the things you can look at when you compare us to New Hampshire is New Hampshire has, you know, a General Assembly that's a majority Republican.
Yeah.
And they have a Republican governor and those sort of things. I mean, and certainly, you know, and we do have a balanced budget. I mean, we don't have a constitution required for it, but we do have a balanced budget. The trouble is we spend every dollar we make. You know, and we got to look at that differently. You just got to. I mean, I think going forward, there'll be some plans for us to figure out how we drop that burden on Vermonters. We don't have to spend every single dollar we pull in.
Yeah, and I think Harry, you know, made a good point. That's like, it didn't used to be this way in Vermont. In fact, we kind of had a long tradition of being fiscally prudent, being careful. You know, obviously it was, you know, we had the old mountain rule, which maybe wasn't the best, but even then, you know, the mountain rule, for folks who aren't aware, it's like, right, Republicans controlled the state, so the only real question is which side of the mountain were we going to nominate a candidate for governor for. And even then, within the Republican Party, it was like, well, let's take turns. There was this very much, I think there was a disposition towards everybody's got something to bring to the table. And I don't always have the best ideas, and the guys on the other side of the mountain don't always have the best ideas. How do we build this in a way that we can incorporate everybody's opinion? And I think what we saw, you know, before the 24 election is Democrats took the exact opposite disposition. They said, we know what to do, we know what's right, you guys don't, so we're going to do things our way. And I just think that's so counter to the ethos of Vermont.
Yeah.
And what we need is more people from different perspectives working together. Just the way that you talked in the beginning.
Yeah.
You and Javin are at different ends of the life spectrum here, and yet you both can appreciate each other and bring different. He can bring his youthful energy, forward-looking. You can bring that backward-looking experience you've had. And putting those things together gets a better product for Vermont.
I totally agree with you. You know, an example to what you're saying, and we look at 181.
Yeah.
You know, the legislature knew better, right? They overrode the governor, and look what happened. And, you know, thank goodness for grassroots. And, you know, identifying, you know, this is a real problem. This was not the best thing for Vermont. And, you know, that's how we got here, Paul.
That's how we got here, and why we are going to be moving in a different direction. Bruce, quickly as we wrap up here, how can people learn more about you, your campaign, what you've got going on? You got a website, Facebook?
Yeah, I'm on Facebook, Bruce Roy for Vermont. My website is Roy for Vermont. That's ROY, the number 4VT.org. Get on there, look at what's going on. Please hit that red button that's out there. We're in campaign finance mode right now. It takes a few bucks to run a good campaign, especially one as big as the county I'm in. So please, take a look. ROY4VT.org.
Check out Bruce Roy right now. Thank you so much for joining us. Up next, we'll have Alan Despathy.